Welcome to the discussion. My guest today is Brian Varine, the Associate Director of Guidehouse Advanced Cyber Solutions. Cybersecurity is one of those topics that never ending. We can talk hours upon hours about cybersecurity. We've had the most recently, the SolarWinds breach, and more data is coming out from that. But today we're going to talk about something that maybe doesn't get enough attention. Maybe it's something that has been forgotten with all this excitement over, changing the way agencies approach cybersecurity, and that is network detection and response. But before we go down that path, Brian, let's just start with the current state of cybersecurity, post SolarWinds breach, other trends you're seeing. Give me a sense of what's out there, what's happening. What are some of the things you're hearing from your customers?
Yeah, I think especially the SolarWinds breach kind of put cybersecurity back in focus, and I think a lot of agencies are starting to find out where they may have had gaps. When the SolarWinds breach came out, a lot of agencies were scrambling around trying to figure out, hey, am I affected? And if I was affected, where did these attackers go? Did they move laterally? How much am I affected? And from what I'm hearing from a lot of people, they kind of struggled to figure out what really happened. So it's really exposed some of the things that need fixing. And then in some cases, it's highlighted some things that actually went well.
How would you compare the SolarWinds breach, for instance, to what we saw with NotPetya or with the one escapes in the name, WannaCry? There it is. I brought it back. How would you compare? I mean, not from a bad, worse, which one's better, but more of a government response, how they handled it.
Yeah, I think the NotPetya and most of the ransomware really hasn't hit government too hard. Matter of fact, I'm not aware of any federal agency being hit by a big ransomware wave. And most federal agencies do a decent job of scrubbing email and making sure the easy things are knocked out. I think CISA and the CDM program's done a real good job of eliminating the low-hanging fruit of vulnerabilities. So I think what you're seeing with the ransomware is it's not that it can't ever hit a federal agency. I just think that federal agencies are doing a pretty good job. This one was very interesting because it was the supply chain attack. So it was dealing with something that an administrator would download and put on the server. So all those protections that we had, all those vulnerability management tools that we have, they really weren't effective because you were applying one of the vulnerability management pieces, which is a patch. And so if you didn't have good network detection or good endpoint detection, you really struggled to figure out that this happened. So I know from a lot of people that when this happened, like I said, they really struggled to figure out what exactly happened. You didn't want to just turn the box off and start up a new one. Did these guys get in? What happened? Where did they go? And what else do I need to do? So yeah, it was a pretty complex and pretty difficult to detect attack at first.
I know we've talked a lot about the supply chain in the past over the last 3, 4, 5 years. That's been a risk mitigation focus for a lot of government, but also a surface area that they haven't really addressed well yet. You and I could probably talk all day about CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, NIST 800-171. But we won't go down there quite yet. There's plenty of people who are talking about that. I want to go back to something you said about good network detection, good endpoint detection. If you didn't have that, it was difficult to figure out what happened. Why? Walk me through a little bit more about why agencies needed to have that to really be in front of, or at least not so far behind.
Yeah, I think over the past 5 years, we've seen a big push to the cloud, and the architecture of networks has changed. It used to be you had this very strong perimeter. Anything that went in or out of the enterprise was going to travel through your firewall, your IDS, and some other anti-malware things. So you had a pretty good idea who was coming and who was going. Well, with the advent of cloud, we've started putting in place express routes, direct connects, direct pipes into the cloud. The other thing is that everything comes in over the web right now. So there's a lot of things that you can do just over an HTTP or HTTPS connection. The other thing is a lot of the network traffic has gone encrypted. So the traditional IDS was always looking for pieces of malware or a specific code. So it was really focused on finding definitely bad stuff. Well, modern attacks, the way that modern attackers are they've been doing it this way. They're stealing credentials. So they're impersonating somebody on your network with privileged credentials, and they're moving around. So your traditional tools that are looking for bad code, malicious software, things like that, they're not going to be effective because the attacker isn't using malicious code. They're basically impersonating somebody. So if you haven't modernized your security, then you're going to have a hard time dealing with these modern attackers. And I always say it's a modern attacker, not advanced, because maybe 5 years ago this was advanced, but this is how attackers are working these days.
And I know that's why the breach that happened with Office of Personnel Management came up many times during the SolarWinds because of the type of attack it was. And that actually leads us down the path to zero trust. We've been talking about zero trust, it feels like, for, I don't know, 2 years now. It's a hot topic. Every conference we would go to or now virtually attend, somebody talks about zero trust. It comes up. One of the things that I've seen over the last year or so is the COVID pandemic has really spurred this move to zero trust, really gave agencies a better understanding of what this means and why it's important. Do you think the SolarWinds piece now is the icing on the cake, if you will, to say that when you talk about zero trust, why this is so important?
Yeah, I think with zero trust, it's a good concept, but I think sometimes people try to simplify it and they think, hey, I'm going to get this identity management solution and I'm going to get this virtual solution and I'm done. But the bottom line is you still have network traffic moving throughout your network. You still have your agency data moving around. And if you don't have good visibility on that, the zero trust really is not going to help you out much. People hear the zero trust and they kind of see it as the easy button. But if you look at the NIST documentation on how to implement zero trust, it's quite difficult. And a big piece of zero trust is network visibility. So you can't just do, one easy piece of zero trust and then call it a day. It's a very effective framework, but you have to do the entire framework.
Walk me through a little bit of what that means when someone hears have to do in the entire framework. Well, I have CDM, I have Einstein, I have TIC, I have, right, all these pieces. What's missing, or what are agencies, what part of zero trust are maybe agencies starting to overlook or not understand?
Yeah, I think what you're going to have to start doing is getting some kind of smarter network detection where you're, like I said previously, most of our intrusion detection is what we used to call NDR. It was focused at the perimeter and it was looking at all the traffic, but we never really had good capability inside the network. So all of that internal, what we call east-west traffic, all of that there's never been a really good way to monitor it. And what you really have to do is start tracking a lot of these privileged users as well. What are they doing? With artificial intelligence and machine learning, you can start doing things that sound easy on paper, but are actually difficult to do in practice. And so you can start tracking, hey, this particular administrator, this is the pattern. He logs into these 3 computers, he touches these 18 servers, and that's pretty much his or her behavior. With some of the new network detection technology, they can start taking a look at that and start figuring out, hey, this administrator is logging in to different systems and they are touching systems that they don't normally talk to. And so they can alert the security personnel, hey, you need to go check this out. And they can leverage some of the other security tools that they have on the network. So without that, you're going to have a difficult time understanding what's going on in your network, especially with the way they want to do zero trust and remote activity. You really need to track what's moving through your network.
It's interesting you talk about, hey, this security person usually goes about this. Now they're doing it, differently. That's something we've been talking about for years, the roles and responsibilities. Does Brian usually log in from Maryland at 8 a.m. and all of a sudden he's logging in from California at 6 a.m.? Is that a red flag? We've been talking about this for a long time. Is that a network detection security operations center? Is that a zero trust? Help me understand how this all fits together.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of those. So you need the technology first to even measure it and see it. So that's where your network sensors come in. And then you need a smart technology that can kind of correlate that. Like I said, it sounds easy to do on paper, but if you actually had an analyst sit down and run a whole bunch of queries through their SIM, it would be very difficult to do. So a lot of people want to focus on threat hunting, but a lot of teams are just blindly hunting around the network looking for odd things. With a good network detection technology, you can kind of give your hunters kind of a head start. I always liken it to, having a guy that's going to go hunting, he's going to go hunt duck. Well, are you just going to let him loose in the middle of nowhere and say, go find one? Or are you going to, the network detection kind of lets you look at a map and say, hey, there's a swamp here. Maybe you should go hunt over there. So that type of thing with the network detection, it's just kind of giving your hunters a head start, and it gives them a lot more information on what's going on. Plus, they can contact the operations teams and say, hey, this is the activity we're seeing, and there's a lot more, hey, this happened at this time, these are the packets that we have, and they can kind of give a more educated response to the operations teams.
And so much of this is the little things. I mean, like the SolarWinds attack, just to go back there for a second, that was, you trusted the patch, you trusted where it was coming from. There's so much trust, but if all of a sudden there was the one piece of data that was like, uh-oh, that just doesn't seem right. If you have a haystack, right, the whole needle in the haystack, but if you have a amount of needles all put together and you're looking for that one needle, you need help. And I think that's where the AI, the ML can come in. That's where the data, and I know we'll get to that eventually. But before we do that, let me ask you, is this idea of understanding the map and knowing what you have, that's got to be a key first step to getting toward this better approach to network detection and response is okay, what do I have and where is it? And then who's touching it? Those are probably 3 data points.
Yeah, especially with the SolarWinds, a lot of people are looking at it like, hey, this was really highly advanced, and it was. But once the attacker got inside the network, they started using pretty normal adversarial techniques. So if you had a good NDR and EDR combo, you should start seeing that attacker starting to move off that SolarWinds box, especially when, SolarWinds, you shouldn't be seeing a lot of, Active Directory type of traffic from that machine. You shouldn't see it pulling files down and things like that. So if you have an NDR that can see that and say, hey, wait a minute, this is the normal behavior of this server, and then today it's doing all kind of crazy things, and just to alert those teams so they can go look at it. I think finding the malicious code in the patch might have been difficult, but I think if you had a good NDR and some other security tools, you should have detected this and been able to get these guys off your network.
I think that's a key piece. It's maturity level. And this talks a lot about the maturity level. I think Vectra also has adopted parts of the maturity level of understanding, okay, are we behind? Are we trying to get in front of it, or are we actually in front of it? It sounds like with the NDR, the way you described it, the agencies or any organization could have almost gotten in front of it, if not been, really limited the risk and attack surface that the SolarWinds attackers had access to.
Yeah, and like I said, once they got in, they used pretty regular adversarial techniques that we've seen. So, like I said, it was a sophisticated attack, but it wasn't something that was beyond a good team's capability to detect and eradicate. So you really, that's why teams and security and at agencies, they really need to start looking at, hey, what's our inventory? When was the last time we updated our technology? If you haven't updated your technology in the last 3 years, it's probably time to start looking at that.
And I think under CDM, there are tools to do that. So maybe agencies should make that easy. Brian, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue our conversation and get into more specifics about network detection and response capabilities.
Okay.
You're listening to the discussion, Why Network Detection Matters More Than Ever, sponsored by Vectra on Federal News Network.